if you have to excuse yourself from the room, please do it quietly and discreetly. And also, please, the microphones. If you have questions, if you want to speak, we have this handheld microphone. Please use the microphone so we can pick up the audio levels on the recording, okay? Also, please participate in our social media. We are on Twitter, and you'll see behind me up here on the screen, our Twitter links, our Facebook links, and like I said, we are doing this live stream, so we are on YouTube Live, and we're going to be on Facebook Live. So participate. Chat, if you hear some comments that really impresses you, chat it out, take some photos, and tweet those out, and that'll be really good for our social media. Some individuals in the room that I would like to recognize. First, I'd like to recognize the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, Karen Morrison. She is the Chief Diversity Officer, and I don't see Karen in the room, but I know she's going to be here. This project is actually partially funded by the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, so we're very grateful for their partnership this morning. I also want to recognize Dr. Richard Lapchak, if you don't mind standing, the cameras will pick you up. Dr. Lapchak is the president of the Institute for Sport and Social Justice, also the chair of the DeVos Sports Business Management Program here on campus. Some other individuals I'd like to recognize. So when I call you, please stand up for the cameras. I would not have been able to do this Invisible Women in Sport podcast project without the support of the ISSJ staff. And so I'd like to recognize, first of all, Delise O'Mealy. She is our executive director. Keith Lee, he's our vice president and COO. Dr. Jeffrey O'Brien, he is our vice president. Congratulations to Jeff. He just completed his doctorate, so that was the first time I got a chance to announce him as doctor. Susie Cates, she's on her way. She's not here, but she's our director for special events. JP Capote, he is here. He's our director for programs and services. And Aaron Banfield, he's not here this morning, but he is our director for logistics and administration. So I would not have been able to complete this project without their support and their assistance. Also, the ISSJ graduate assistants have been instrumental in this project as well. So I know they're all in the room. Kaylee Simpson, Kayla Henderson, Courtney Cesarini, Brittany Solis, Stephen Brisson, David Zimmerman, whom you'll hear from shortly here, Madeline Schroeder, Daniel Filipowski, and Amber Hudson. So thank you to all of those individuals. Also, another important person on this project, this individual has been the glue to this project. Without him, this thing would not have gotten off the ground. So you're going to hear from him a lot this morning, but he has been my right-hand man in this project, Mr. Matt Edelson. So I'm going to get off the microphone here because that's not where I'm most comfortable. But I'm going to introduce our morning moderator. I am thrilled to introduce one of our DeVos Sports Business Management graduate program students to moderate today's event. David Zimmerman will proudly tell you that he is from the great state of Nebraska. But he will also proudly tell you that he eventually left to join the United States Air Force. David recently retired after a 24-year career as an Air Force officer. His career involved 8 duty assignments and 5 deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, and other austere locations. During his time in the military, he made the time to finish his bachelor's degree at the University of Nebraska at Omaha and earned a master's of business administration at the University of the Incarnate Word in San Antonio, Texas. David has joined the DeVos program with the intent of starting a new career in the sports industry, perhaps in sports operations or player development. I am willing to bet that he has a very bright future in front of him. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Garnett, for that kind introduction. Good morning and welcome everyone to the Invisible Women in Sport panel discussion and live stream podcast. I extend a very special welcome today, and I want to thank our distinguished guests, speakers, program directors, staff, and students. As Garnett already mentioned, I'm David Zimmerman, a DeVos Sport Business Management graduate student here at the University of Central Florida. Go Knights! I represent the DeVos program cohorts, in addition to the hundreds of DeVos Sport Business Management graduate program alumni around the world today. The DeVos program offers graduate students the opportunity to earn a Master's of Sport Business Management and a Master's of Business Administration. The foundation of the DeVos program is strengthened by its core values in ethics, diversity, leadership, community service, and innovation. The program is truly an integrative, living classroom with a rigorous and comprehensive academic schedule that keeps the cohort of students together for 2 years. A DeVos graduate student discovers the role of sport in society, how the power of sport helps create a more inclusive society, and how the responsibility of the power of sport should be used to make a difference. I would be remiss if I did not give a very special thank you to Richard and Helen DeVos and their family. Richard and Helen DeVos are the namesakes and founders of the DeVos Sport Business Management program. Their leadership, their vision, and contributions to the incredible program are the major reason we're able to host this event today. All of us at the DeVos program were deeply saddened by the passing of Helen DeVos in October of 2017 and the recent passing of Richard DeVos in September of 2018. The DeVos program is on course to continuously exceed their expectations long into the future. I also want to recognize the University of Central Florida's Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Their inspiring vision, mission, and goals allowed them to provide funding for today's panel discussion and podcast. Their financial support is a key reason why we're able to make this event happen today. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. He's a fellow member of the DeVos cohort. He's from New Smyrna Beach, Florida, and he received his undergraduate degree in economics from the University of Florida. He's currently a graduate assistant for the University of Central Florida's baseball team. And after he completes the program, Lee aspires to manage a PGA golf course, but I'm willing to bet lunch that we're going to see Lee managing a major PGA or LPGA in the very near future. Today, however, Lee is going to provide us with some important background information to help set the scene for today's panel discussion. Lee, thank you for volunteering your time to do this. The floor is yours.
Before we began, I just want to say that going into this, I knew that there was a problem with women and particularly women of color in sport, but we good? All right. So going into this, I knew that there was a problem, but upon further research, I realized how the problem is. So before we dive into the figures, I want to start with a couple icebreakers. So true or false, ethnic minority females make up 6% of athletic directors across the NCAA. How many of you think that's true? All right, you'd all be correct. It's false. It's actually about 2.8%. And the second one is African American females represent 16% of vice presidents or higher at NBA teams. How many think that actually is true? So we can get going. So this first slide is just the NCAA. So the first right here, you can see it's athletic directors. So of 1,126, 755 are white males. And this is Division I, II, and III, all conferences, FBS, FCS, everything. White women make up 207. So you can see that 67% is white men and 18% is white women. So 85%. And African American men is 90, which is this. And then African American women, there's 23 out of 1,126. And then other, which is defined as American Indian, Alaskan, Hispanic or Latino, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and 2 or more races. So other men make up 42, and other women, there's only 9. And then for senior women in administration, which is right here, we can see that of 1,099, 912 are white women. 138 are African, and 49 is other. And then for school presidents, of 1,027, 630 are white men. 218 are white women. 64 African American men. 32 African American women. And then 6% is other men, and 2% is. Go to the next slide. All right, so we'll move on to the NBA. So at the league office, women holding a position of vice president or higher, there's only 60 women in total. 42 are white women. African American women, there's only 9. Asian, 6. Latino, 1. There is women who did not specify, there's 2. And then the vice president at teams. So the total team vice president, 583. So of those, 141 are women. 101 are white women. 22 African American women. 4 Latino women. 9 Asian Pacific Islander, and 5 other. And then this slide is just a graphic of women at the league office, which is up top. So you can see it's declined, but it jumped back up in 2017. And then team CEO and president. So until 2010, it was 0. So that paints a graphic. Okay, moving on to the NFL. So team vice presidents, 59 of 61 are white women. 1 Asian and 1 Latina. And then the 61 vice presidents, that's an increase of 3 from 2016. And then the league office, there's 45 total women, which is up from 35 and 16. 36 of 45 are white women. African American make up 5 of the 45. Latinas, 3 of the 45. And other is 1. Moving on to the MLB. So start off with the central office staff. The number of women doubled in 2017, even though it's still very low. So white men make 299 of the 612 employees at the league office. Men of color, 154 of the 612. Women of color, 145 of the 612. and other men is 14 of the 612. Moving on to the team vice presidents. In 2014, there were 65 men in the position. 2015, 74. 2016, 82. And 2017 of 80. So 515 total team vice presidents, 80 are women. White men make up 371 of the 515. Men of color make up 60. Other men make up 4, and as I mentioned earlier, women is 80. And the final league we have is the MLS. So at the league office, there's 371 professional employees, 169 white men, 85 men of color, 13 other men, and 104 women, which is 28% of the league office. And for vice presidents of the teams, I'd like to start off with, so the women in professional positions at the MLS, there's 124, and then you go up to senior administration, there's 71. And then you go up to vice president, there's 29. And then general manager and CEO or higher, there's 0 women. So VPs of teams, of 160, 100 are white men. That's 75%. 10 of the 160 men of color. Other men, there's 1, and women, there's 29, which is 18%. And that's it. These are the sources. I got them from the NCAA and then the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sports. So thank you to Tides for the day.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for again for volunteering to set the scene for us today. I'd like to introduce our next guest speaker, who is Matt Edelson. Matt Edelson is the host and producer of our podcast, Invisible Women in Sport, and is a longtime journalist who believes in the power of personal to inspire, educate, and move hearts and minds. Matt has interviewed senators, Nobel Prize winners, and most valuable players. But he finds striking up conversations with random strangers to be far more memorable. In his words, everyone has a fascinating story to tell, especially those people who feel they've lived just ordinary lives. They're the most interesting people of all to meet. Matt has reported in numerous genres, including sports, science, and medicine. In the past, he's worked for National Public Radio and CBS Radio, and he's been published in Houghton Mifflin's Best American Sports Writing annual anthology. He's produced and hosted forums on sports and the media for the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. And in something totally out of left field, he's the co-author of 5 health-oriented cookbooks at Random House. Please help me welcome Matt Edelson.
By the way, I look happy there because that was my wedding day. And that's the last time I was in a suit. So, just clip me. Clip you? Clip me. Got me, Mick. Got me. I was in a pretty good mood this morning until I just... what I want to do first here is, because, well, I was pointing to myself as being part of the problem. I guess I am sometimes. Those numbers you just heard, and good morning, everybody, and I hope you had your coffee today. Those numbers are the problem. And what I want to do is bring up 2 people here who are part of the solution. People who are looking at the next generation, all you, and they're teaching and mentoring and showing where maybe 5, 10 years from now, we don't all see those numbers, I'm still pointing at myself, and say, this is horrible, this is awful, this is wrong. So, let me bring up my wonderful Yes? I'm going to bring up Coach Tina Sloan Green up here. Come on, folks. And her daughter, Coach Tracy Green. Do a mic check. Good morning. Test 1, test 2. I could sing to everybody, but then run from the room.
Test, test.
Are we good, Eddie? Excellent. And by the way, to everybody who is out in, do you call it web land, internet land? Can you see I'm an old guy, right? Welcome, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Test, test. Shalom. Good morning.
Hello?
Say hi. Tell them what you and Frank had for breakfast today, so we know it works.
We had omelets.
Yeah. Do you guys go back to the pancake house?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let me introduce these folks, as I said first. On your right is, I could call it Coach Tina Sloan. Tina Sloan Green, pioneer Tina Sloan Green. She's had an unbelievable career, a Hall of Fame career, but both on and off the field. And let me tell you some of the things she's done. First of all, in 1969, she broke the color barrier as the first African American on the U.S. national women's lacrosse team. It was just one of many firsts that you've had in your career as an athlete, a teacher, and a coach. You built Temple lacrosse team literally from scratch. She took a club team in 1974, I believe, and within 8 years won the NCAA championship. Think about that for a second in the big world of sport. Yeah, wouldn't you guys like to go out and take a team and move it there in 8 years? That would be unbelievable. She was there for 17 years at Temple. She won 2 more NCAA titles. She had a perfect season. 19-0, am I right?
Right, you're correct.
And I remember you said something like, winning 1. Winning 3? That's really something. But it wasn't enough when she had this great career. There was another career that was going to go beyond it, part and parcel of her efforts always with the community. She saw a problem out there. And in 1992, she and some friends set out to fix that problem. She co-founded the Black Women in Sport Foundation. It was started in Philadelphia, her hometown. Its mission was, and it's still to increase the involvement of African American women and girls in all aspects of sport, essentially creating a pipeline, which is what this is all about. And this is how you make the numbers move. You create a pipeline. And she's helping women and girls get involved in everything from athletics, coaching, and administration within sport. And as far as honors, we could take up the rest of the show just doing this, but she's been inducted into the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame, the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame, National Women's Sports Hall of Fame, among others. Please give a round of applause, if you would, to Coach Tina Sloan Green. It's not easy being a kid sometimes, is it, when you got a mom like that? But yet, like mother, like daughter. Let me tell you a little bit about Coach Tracy Green. First, let's cover her career as a tennis player, because she's been a tennis player, an athlete scholar, a coach, and a diversity activist. You really are excellence personified, and it's such a delight to meet you. I had a chance to meet them, have dinner with them last night. As a Florida Gator, and I don't know, no booing. Oh, good, see, Gator chomp. All right, there we go over there. Tracy was part of the 1998 NCAA championship team. She ranked 5th in the country in doubles and 12th in the country in singles play the next year. Here's where you can really tell consistency and work ethic. She was voted 3 times C team, both singles and doubles. After that, and I think from some of the advice you got from your coach while you were at Florida, she moved into the coaching ranks. At Temple, she was the assistant coach on the women's 2003 tennis team that won the A10, the Atlantic 10 title. And at the same time, and this is important, folks, it's not one-sided here, you earned your master's in sports administration, right? And that's not easy when you're coaching and you're doing everything else. People don't realize how much time and effort that is. Soon after, she became Temple's head coach. She promptly led the Owls to their first national ranking in 2007. That's a big thing. Then, check this out, she went from Temple to Harvard. She got offered and she accepted the job at Harvard. She completely turned that team around. In 2009, she led the Harvard Crimson to the Ivy League title. She was the first African-American coach in Harvard's history in any sport to do that. She's been at Harvard for 12 years. You've become the second winningest tennis coach in the history of the program, and I think Harvard's been around for a few weeks, right? But beyond that, she's also, as I said, an activist for women and minority participation in sport. You serve on the USTA's Collegiate Varsity National Committee. You're vice chair, if I have that right, of the Sportsman's Tennis and Enrichment Center.
Chair now, yeah.
Oh, she got it. Okay. Very good. How long a term do you serve?
2 years.
Oh, they're going to miss you afterwards. All right. And also, she's on the board of the Black Women in Sport Foundation. So please give a hand to Coach Tracy Green. Before we start our little talk here, there's one person I also want to mention. He's not going to believe this. In the front here. You need people who are the backbone of families to support excellence in their own right. I'd like to briefly introduce, I could take a while with this, Frank Green. Frank Green, Frank, stand up for a sec, would you, man? You want a hand? First of all, the coolest part of this whole conversation, 53 years they've been married. That's a love. That's a love. My parents were married 53 years. That's awesome. Frank was an amazing athlete in his own right. He was a collegiate star. He became a track coach, from what I understand. But here's the most important thing that struck me about Frank and Tina. They've opened their home for decades to athletes, African-American athletes from around the country. People know they come to Philadelphia. There is a place for them to stay, a place for them to be welcome, a place to have community, and a place to get ready to compete. I think that is just fabulous. And I'm thanking you for that. And if I may, real quick, I'm going to mention your son, because that's the only member of the Green family who is not here today. Yeah, I'm going to give your son a shout out. Frank, it's Frank III, right? You're Frank Jr., so it's Frank III. He was a tennis star, like his sister, at Florida A&M. So see, they worked the circuit around here. He was Conference Player of the Year at Florida A&M. And now, if I have this right, he's Associate Director of the Legacy Program. Philadelphia has this amazing youth tennis program that was named for Arthur Ashe, I believe, the Arthur Ashe Youth Tennis and Education Program, and Frank is part of that. So Frank, I hope you're out there listening. We gave you a shout out this morning. So I would just like to take one more second, because I know I'm babbling a little bit here, but I'd like to talk about the Invisible Women in Sport podcast for a moment, because there's a reason that Tracy came down from Massachusetts, and Coach, you came down from, and we've had women from all over the country participate in this. And one, of course, was to highlight the problem with the numbers that you all just saw. The whole point is this. You have to put a human face on those numbers. I mean, nothing against Lee. The numbers are important. You need to bring them to administrators to change minds. If you're ever going to change minds, have data. I mean, you can't be a manager in baseball these days without data. You know how this goes. So you need the data. It's absolutely important. But if you don't put a face on the problem, on what it's like to live a life where there's a glass ceiling over your head, if you can't highlight that, then hearts and minds don't get changed, in my opinion. And that has been what this has been all about, this Invisible Women in Sport podcast. I thank everybody who's been involved with it. I thank Garnett. I thank Keith. I thank you, Delise. I thank you, Dr. Lapchick. I actually thank Mike Minitry, who's been our engineer on this. Also, I want to give a shout out to Eddie today, who's doing the video from Laconic Digital. Did I get the name right? Okay, great. Everybody here understands the idea that the story is vital to change hearts and minds. And, excuse me, because I can usually do pretty good, but sometimes I forget where I'm at. Where? Well, look, really the point is this. All the women we talk to have one thing in common. Yeah, they're administrators or they're athletic directors, the 13 women we talk to. But first and foremost, they're teachers, they're mentors, and they believe in each and every one of you. And here's where this talk today becomes important. Okay, you're not just here because you got to be here or you want to hear some people talk. Here's where it becomes important. You, every one of you, have a dream of what you want to accomplish in this life. You may be figuring it out now. Nobody's supposed to know at your age, but you have a dream and you have a passion. Had a dream and a passion. You are all going to hit obstacles as you go through this path. Some of them are going to be incredibly unfair. These women have hit obstacles in their life that were incredibly unfair. You want to succeed. They're going to show you their path to how they got through life and where they learned and how they grew from the people that were around them. And that is the you learn something here today beyond the amazing stories they tell because they believe in you, and that's why they're here. That's all I have to say. So I hope you don't mind. Is that okay? All right. Deep breath. Good morning. All right. It's kind of hard talking to you because each one of you individually, we could do a whole podcast on. But let's just start back from the beginning because I always like finding out where people came from, how they got to be there. Coach?
Anything you want. Coach, professor.
Professor Coach. I love that. All right, we'll call you Coach. We'll call you Coach. You grew up in Philadelphia,
Right.
in Eastwick. Give me an idea what it was like growing up there. Paint a picture for people of the family you had, the support it created. Let me hear.
Oh, Eastwick is right near the airport in Philadelphia, and it was a great community. And we were right next to Tenneco and wildlife. It was the city. And of course, they were building the airport, so my family was, forced to move. But there we had community. We had our like 5 or 6 churches in the area, and that was our social life. The church that down the street. And my parents they didn't go to college, but they wanted to make sure that that I went to college and my other sisters and brothers went to college, and so it was a very secure. And we probably were. My father worked at the Navy Yard,
Right.
and my mom was she was a stay-at-home mom, but she took in the neighborhood children. And right now, if she did that, it would be illegal.
Child protective services there in a heartbeat.
Right.
Yeah.
And they made clothes. They did everything that was entrepreneurs. So
Before they put that word on
right.
it.
At school, there was 13 people in my graduating class. My school went from first grade through 8th grade, and actually, never saw a black teacher in my life. Back then, it was Jewish teachers.
Right.
That sort of
So even in Eastwick, there was no African American teachers.
No. So my teachers recommended that I go to Girls High, and I was one of 2 in the Girls High. Girls High is like a very academic school for academically talented girls. And
It's the best school in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
There's no school
I
like
think
it.
so.
Well, no, but
Right.
it is.
But so I went to Girls High, and in Eastwick we never had any organized sports. We just played kickball and
Stickball you played.
kickball,
Yeah.
yep, hopscotch, But it was fun, but boys accepted us. If you were good, you got on the boys' team. It wasn't any discrimination based on sex. It was based on talent. So when I went to Girls High, these girls were brilliant. The past president of University of Pennsylvania was in my homeroom, Judy Seitz.
No, just so people understand, there was very small American young girls in this school, right?
Yeah.
How big was the school? Thousands, maybe? No.
Yeah, I guess about 400 or something. But
And each year they accepted 20 African American
about
students
20,
from around
yeah,
Philadelphia.
right. So, I was sort of out of my league, and I probably would have transferred to my neighborhood school had it not been for a teacher, Jane Weissnab, another, a white Jewish teacher. There was no African American teachers, no teachers of color, girls. And in gym class, she said, you're good. Why don't you come out for the field hockey team? And I tell all the young people today, back in the day, if a teacher told you to do something, there was no ifs, ands, and buts about it. You just did it. So, you know, I came out for the field hockey team, and I thought this was the stupidest game because we never had any organized sport. Girls running around hitting each other in the sticks and all this stuff. However, that, you know, sort of changed my life because I found out I was pretty good at this. And I had where Eloise Coker, who was 2 years ahead of me,
Right.
who was an African-American girl who had, as well. And then I went out for the basketball team, and it sort of gave me a sense of belonging. And they would, the teachers would have us, you know, help them teach classes.
Right.
So, and they would help us, you know, get tutors for, like, so I would catch up with my academics. And since my parents didn't go to college, my PE teachers, my coaches, they sort of told me what to do and told me, you're going to go to Westchester, because Temple was de-emphasizing sport at the time.
Well, let me ask you, just as you're telling this through, along the way, your parents, I know they were deeply religious, right? And you were one of 7 children, and your dad and your mom putting 7 kids, you know, through high school and where they're going to go. What were some of the messages you got from your community, from your parents, from your family about, look, once you were out there, and you were going to get a lot of grief because you were out of your community now. How did they sort of teach you, whether directly or indirectly, to sort of face what was going to come and just keep your eye, as they used to say, keep your eye on the prize?
But I think growing up in that environment made me feel comfortable with myself. And if I would come home and tell my mother something, she says, "God don't like ugly." You know, that was her
God doesn't like ugly people.
Right. So she, and lots of things she told me back then I don't understand until later on.
Right.
Because they use all kinds of, you know, slogans and whatever.
Yeah.
But now I understand them.
Right.
But it was comforting to come back and be, you know, in a stable environment. Like I said, I could never have done what Tracy did and go to Harvard, you know, because you know, I wasn't, you know, I was to do what I did at Temple because I had my family. So it was that support system, so that familiarity of my husband and whatever.
But even when you went to play with, like, Eloise, Ms. Cougar, knowing there were other players out there as you went up tell people about how important it was that you might have been the first in different things, but you saw other people that you could model yourself after, right? I mean, in terms of players and other people, or maybe not.
Well, actually, you know, it was sort of pioneer.
Yeah.
And I contribute that to my coaches because they, again, recognize talent. And I happened to go to Westchester. They told me to go to Westchester.
Right.
And Bonnie Groh, who is the most, I think, the most, you know, renowned field hockey and lacrosse coach in the world.
Right.
And she was interested in winning, so she said, you know.
This is Westchester University, and well, it was Westchester State College, I think.
State College.
Right, and now it's Westchester University where you went to play lacrosse. And you were telling us about the coach.
Right. So, and she was also my teacher because, you know, she taught classes, and she had gone to her sinus and all the sinus alumni.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Bryn Mawrs and the Swarthmores and whatever. These were the ones who were greatly involved in field hockey and lacrosse. So she told me to come out again for, you know, for field hockey. And if you came from the city schools, they put you on this side, you know, and if you came from the suburban school, you put you on this side.
Right.
But when she came, you know, to Westchester, she just was looking at the talent. Her mind was based on, you know, winning. And I was just trying to have fun. I had no idea. I had no dreams of being on the national team and all that. And I would run down after seeing all my soap operas, run down to the field, and she would know by 4 o'clock.
What soap opera did you watch?
As the World Turned.
As the World Turned, okay. This is the important stuff. Come on, guys, you know.
I was just having fun.
Right.
And then, you know, I started playing this, you know, lacrosse and field hockey, and realizing, you know, I'm just as good as these young ladies. I'm just as good as they are. And then, you know, I said, And then I started competing against them in the national events, and people began to recognize my talent, even though I was kind of different because I never played lacrosse before until I got to Westchester.
Right.
So I was cradled like the men cradle back then.
Oh, you mean, yeah, right.
Right. And so, you know, that was, again, it was coaches and teachers, professors that really gave me the confidence that, you know, you're pretty good.
Right. Now, Jim Brown, and you may remember his name, Jim Brown from football and other things, but Jim Brown was an incredible lacrosse player, I guess at Syracuse maybe, I think in the late 50s, right? Did someone like Jim Brown come into your mind in terms of just like saying, well, you know, as an African American who's played the sport, or was that even at the time you were just doing your thing?
No,
and
I was just doing my thing. I guess my idol was Hank Aaron, really.
Really?
You know, because television was just becoming into play, so you see the Hank Aaron. So
right.
When I was growing up, you know, there was a lot of male role models actually.
Well, who else?
So,
who else would you
and
like?
then, you know, the people that are around, like the Bonnie Groves and the Marge Watsons, and you know, people who actually saw playing the sport. They became, but there were very few, if any, you know, African American females at that time that were on that level. Right. So they told me, you know, like after I was nervous about teaching in the city, so I taught at Unionville in Chadds Ford, and I was the first African American teacher at Unionville.
Right.
And they told me because they wanted me to start an adaptive program that I could also create a lacrosse program. I was assistant basketball coach.
Right. So now you were teaching at Unionville, which is in the suburbs, and you were also at William Penn, which was in the city, right? And what were you doing?
William Penn?
Yeah.
Because
you taught, right?
I taught, and I taught and coached, but I got there because when I was at Unionville, that's when Martin Luther King had gotten killed, and I was so upset. You know, I said, I've got to get out of here. I've got to go back and my community and help.
Right.
And by that time, my coach at girls' side was now the at William Penn.
Right.
So I felt safe that I could, you know, could be comfortable teaching in that kind of environment.
Let me hold you on a second, and let me ask a couple of questions as you're bringing things up that occur to me. You just mentioned, obviously, 1968, Martin Luther King. Now, everybody knows about Colin Kaepernick in our audience. Not everybody knows that 50 years before, in 1968, Tommy Smith, John Carlos, Mexico City Olympics, really the first worldwide seen athletic protest after they won the gold medals, and they suffered horribly for it. They couldn't get jobs afterwards. I'm just sort of wondering, at the time, how did those protests register in your community? How were those received? Because, you know, they got vilified by the press, by the white press, you know, same thing Cassius Clay, later Muhammad Ali, went through. What was the reaction in your community?
In my world, they were heroes, you know, and like I tell the young people now, if I were younger, I would be probably taking a knee. I'm too old now to get down there, but because it was what they were doing it for,
right?
You know, and they were doing it for all of us. And at Westchester, we were protesting. We were NAACP. We were protesting because we couldn't go to the dorms, or to the off-campus homes. That's the way I went to school.
It was segregated? They wouldn't let you live there?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, we couldn't go to the 5 and 10 cent store back then, it was called. We couldn't go to the 5 and 10
You couldn't go to the lunch counters?
No.
Same thing when I was living in Boca.
Right,
yeah.
right. So I knew, you know, what they were trying to do. So that was important. And then Martin Luther King just galvanized everybody. So
right.
You know,
but that changed sport and society in a way, didn't it?
Yeah, and in a way, and I think that sort of pointed out some of the discrepancies that existed. And you know, for me, it was really eye-opening.
Well, you're close to home, obviously.
Right.
The very next year, '69, was the year that you became, and Tracy, I promise I'm going to get to you. I feel bad. She's sitting there listening to her mom. She's probably heard this a million times, right? Yeah. 1969, the next year, you become right? Next to the first African American to be on the U.S. national women's lacrosse team. Tell us a little bit about the story. First of all, how you got chosen, and what was your reaction and your family and your community's reaction when they got the news?
Well, I was excited, and a lot of my teammates from Westchester and people that I knew were on the team, so that was exciting. And then to be able to travel.
Also, a lot of your
right.
whites, great. In that
so, and be able to travel, to Australia and Great Britain. I mean, that was really not only exciting, but it was also a little nerve-wracking too. The fact that you're going on Australia.
Had you been on a plane before?
I had gone to Haiti when I was right after school. So
really,
yeah.
You had family or?
No, when it's a girls' high. We went on this excursion,
right.
so that was. But family, well, I mean, everybody was excited. The whole community was excited about seeing me, and it was really great for them to see me go on, be first of all selected, and then.
Who told you? Your coach, or who told you first that you were selected? How'd you find out? Did you get a phone call? I'm just curious if you're.
I remember that. I'm trying to sound, I don't remember. I just know how.
Yeah. You talked. I've heard other quotes from you where you've talked about being a pioneer, and you've used certain words. Mm-hmm. One was lonely. Mm-hmm. Another one I heard was you got to represent. Mm-hmm. That was one of your quotes. Mm-hmm. Try to explain to the audience, to us, just sort of. It's probably a huge range of emotions that you go through when you're placed in that position. Can you share with us some of the things that you carried with you and how you handled it?
I said when you're a first, I always say I want to be a first, but I don't want to be the only.
Right.
That was in my mind. And it is, because you realize that if you mess up, people judge you by what I did, and anybody coming after me, if you get a couple of years to make it or break it.
Right.
And if I didn't do well, then they're not going to give you other people another chance. So, I felt to do the best I could do for the next generation or next group of people coming along. And I thought it as a team. I realized early on I couldn't do it all. I wasn't an expert in everything. So I tried to build a team of coaches and support system around me. And when those parents, when I recruited, parents from the rural areas, many of them had never even talked to an African American female. Mm-hmm. So I always made sure that I had white assistant coaches who were used to that environment.
Right.
And then it would take them about good 6 or 7 months to get used to me and be sitting and say something to me. And then different things like even now with the social media.
Oy. We're both the same.
Right. You need those people who have expertise in those areas. Right. And I'm quiet, soft-spoken, but serious. Mm-hmm. And my other assistant coaches were, loud and outspoken and whatever. So that teamwork. And then back in the day, you had Temple had a good support system as well, because you had people who would help you with the administration. Nowadays you have to do everything,
right.
But back then you didn't have to do that. So it was a team thing.
I remember a lot of the women that we had in our podcasts along the way said things like they would go into meetings with Eva, or they'd meet a parent, mm-hmm. and the parent wouldn't, if they came in with a white male or mm-hmm. Or a white female or whatnot, they would automatically assume that the white male, the white female was the coach, was the commissioner, was the this. And they said they'd always see the look on somebody's face when they'd say, no, I'm the coach, I'm the whatever, and they'd be like dead silent. People would sort of recover.
Well, yeah, and that was always, with my team riding the bus, mm-hmm. and we go in to get, for the meal, and they would go give the check to either my assistant coach or somebody else.
They never give you the check?
And the team, we would all laugh.
Right.
Because the assumptions that people make. Mm-hmm. But they learned a lot from that, We had the most diverse lacrosse team in the country, as far as race, uh, gender, as far as
Socioeconomic,
and also religion, and we didn't always get along together. They didn't always get along together, but the fact
team
is,
does.
right.
Right.
However, the fact is that we talked about it, you know, and if they knew that if they had a party and they invited everybody and said it was a team party, then why did you exclude such and such?
Right.
So, and I think that's what's missing now. Like, things are so closed where, you know, people don't talk.
Right.
And when I hear from my players now, they bring up some of the things I don't even remember, but they remember them.
She'll tell you all.
And you know, and I'm a, you know, sort of you know, goody two shoes as they would call it, like didn't believe in drinking and all that kind of stuff. As a parents, if you come to Temple under me, if I take you down Florida for that trip, and they get in trouble, you're coming down there to get them. Because I'm not going to, you know, into jail to get them out.
Right.
So, you know, so I was me, and then I was comfortable with me. I think when parents, you know, and the scholarships helped tremendously. We were able to recruit.
That's at Temple, where you were able. Well, I think you told me what you took one major scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
You were able to get one scholarship in Temple, and what'd you do with it? You ended up what? Splitting it? So
splitting it among 2 or 3 young ladies, and
right.
And so that was beginning. And then my classmates at Westchester helped me build the team because we were excluded from going to the real ritzy camps to coach. So we
Oh, do you mean like sort of like in basketball they have the ABCD camps and all the stuff where
right.
you'll find the top recruits in the country?
At camps in Boston and, you know, Mercedes.
Right. Full budget or
Well, no.
you weren't even invited.
We weren't invited, so we
Right.
decided to start our own camp. So we call it Tip of My Camp, right outside of Chester.
Oh, I heard that. Yeah.
3 of us, and they were coaching at area schools.
Right.
So that's how. So we in the summertime we would bring the students to our camp, maybe for a week's camp,
Right.
and expose them to field hockey. And this is a field hockey.
Right.
So they were out there coaching, and so they would send their kids to Temple.
Right.
So they were very, very helpful in recruiting.
You said something, and this is, I thought this was a really, really sort of a key point about there are going to be times, there were times in your life where you just said, I know if I try to be recognized as the executive director, as the administrator, as the coach, people aren't going to take me seriously. You said something like, right, this is bad, yeah. Not the right color. I talk like a city girl. These are all your quotes of what you said. And so instead of trying to fight a battle you couldn't win, you started your own path, right? And it seems, is that something you did time and time again, that basically, like you said, you weren't invited to this major coaching camp for players, you start your own. Did you find that was a repeating theme of what you had to do in your life?
Yeah, and that's why the Black Women's Sport Foundation was created. Carol Oglesby, who years after I did.
Right, Professor Carol, right.
Right. She would bring us to forums like this. We never see anybody that looked like us. Nikki Frank was a grad student,
right.
and she was also the first fencing coach, and still is a
She's
fencing
still there.
coach.
She's 38 years she's there
right.
still, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and Dr. Alpha Alexander, she was one of
Right.
Carol Oglesby's students.
Right.
So, we said, Carol, we got to do something about this. And he was in charge of the continuing education program at Temple for the area coaches.
Right.
So that's how the first, and that was in 1976. That's what was the first Black Women's Sport Foundation.
Right, and then you had in 1992.
Right, and then in 1992, Linda Green, who was in the law school.
She's a lawyer, right? Yeah,
I'm sorry. The law
Right.
school, and she also, we had daycare was so important in our lives.
I realize coaches and people, they lose jobs
Right.
or teachers because they
Right.
don't have the daycare.
Right.
And back then, if you
Right.
took time off, your professional career would derail.
Right. So I met so many people around the university through the daycare. And so Linda's
Right.
son was in daycare as well.
Right.
And we were fighting to keep the daycare center open. So anyway, she was telling me about, she'd been a basketball, played basketball. And so she introduced me to Sharice Lilly, who was at Ballard leading firms in the country. And,
The leading law,
right,
yeah.
right. And they incorporated us after we had gotten a small grant from the association from the Footwear Association.
Right.
So.
But these are all things that you had to create, and you had, because again, it wasn't going to move forward otherwise.
And you know, I thought by this time, I looked at the stats up there. You had the stats up there.
Make you cry.
Right. But I thought, you know, we would need the foundation.
But you'd phase yourself out because you no longer.
Right. But now I feel like we need it more than ever.
Right. Right.
And we were able to do such great things, and we've had outcomes. And one of the things that another great program was the National Youth Sports Program.
Oh, this was a program. Where's Garnett? You were part of that too, right? Yeah.
And we were able to meet so many
you were
people around the country, and it was started because of all the riots that they had, you know, during the '60s, and
All areas of major cities.
Right. So through that program, which I think was again one of the best models in the country, and it no longer exists. But
yeah, because they stopped funding it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Washington.
Right. So I was able to, I was selected to be in charge of that program.
Right.
And along with, and Jay Norman, the guys, I sort of ran it, but they were out in the front.
They were doing the thing. All right. I want to say hi to Tracy. Hi, Tracy. What goes, just a curiosity, what goes through your mind as you hear these stories from your mom? I mean,
yeah, Matt, it's just amazing. Just listening to the stories, I hear them a lot, but I hear them differently each time.
Right.
I think the main thing that resonates the most to me when I hear her say she was the only one, like that to me resonates a lot.
Right.
Because I was the only one, still am, you know, a lot. And it's amazing how things haven't changed that much, right?
Well, you look at the numbers, they don't change.
Look at the numbers, right? And some of that is our sports. I mean, look at lacrosse and tennis.
Sort of like expensive sports or elite sports to get coaching in and whatnot.
Two sports that are not, you know, predominantly played or, you know, by Black people or minorities in general. But that's the main thing that resonates to me when I hear her talking. Yes.
So, but yet at the same time, how does knowing that your mom and your dad, you know, were pioneers in another way, what sort of comfort did that give you growing up? Or as you start, I mean, again, you went to a sport, predominantly white sport. Now, actually, before we get into that, talk about some of the mentors that you had beyond your parents. Because again, we talked before about how everybody came through the Sloan Green home growing up. Some amazing players, some amazing came through who meant a lot to you. Can you tell us a little bit about?
I mean, first of all, I always like to move and be, you know, just sports in general. And to them as parents who ran a mom who was involved as a coach was pretty normal for me. They didn't really feel like they were mom and dad. Right. So
you didn't realize until later how different mom and dad were.
So when we had people over the house who were athletes, or she dragged me along to hear Dr. Lapchick at a convention or something, I was just like, oh, this is interesting. You know? So I'd be like 9 or 10, and so I was just brought along. So it felt pretty normal, you know, and you know, to go to practice after school every day, and you know, find an open gym and shoot baskets and you know, call out plays to myself, 3, 2, 1, score, you know, stuff like that every day after school.
Wait a minute, Dr. J would have been about the right time?
It could have been anybody. You know, John Chaney put me in a game, you know.
Oh, John Chaney, right, Temple.
Sporting events at Temple was pretty normal for myself and my younger brother.
Sure.
So I think growing up in a college environment made it really special for me. And then starting playing tennis, I was involved in that National Youth Sports Program, like she mentioned. And then when I got better, then I got some more mentors in my life. One was Arthur Ashe, I think you showed him on the picture there. Took an interest in me as a tennis player. And then, yeah, I pretty much got better.
Arthur took more than just an interest in sports with you. He said a lot of things to you that, I mean, I read his autobiography years ago. I think it's called Grace Under Pressure or something like that, or Grace Under, I forgot, it's something like that. He was an incredibly wise and thoughtful person. And maybe you can, if it's not too personal, I've seen it published, so hopefully you talk about it. Talk about how he helped you put sport in a perspective of how you could achieve other things in life. Use sport as a vehicle.
Sure. There weren't that many you could look to, right, growing up. So you saw Arthur Ashe, and he was this larger-than-life figure. And at that time, I thought tennis was cool. You know, it was like a 13-year-old, 12-year-old, but it wasn't as cool as some other sports, right? You know, the team sports were more fun. And so when he took an interest in me and said, hey, come to my camp, I want to work with you and some other players, that was really special to me. And then when I got to go down to wherever his camp was located, it could have been Florida one year. He was all in a room, and we wouldn't be doing tennis stuff. We'd be doing mental games, and we'd be playing ancient Mayan, like we'd been playing like Mancala, you know, all together and learning how to think. And so he was a really interesting human being. So he had young kids from all over, you know, different ages. You know, really thinking about sports and life, you know, and he had some of his buddies, Stan Smith at the camp. So you learn from all different people. One of the things he always told my parents is, you know, Tracy should go to college, you know, and he really saw some of the paths that people were taking at that time. They were just going straight out of high school right into the pros, and then or
going to like the Bollettieri camps, or going to those are Nick Bollettieri, a lot of the people who had the schools that were kind of like the one-off, and it wasn't about education. It was about play.
Yes, and he saw the future beyond that, so he said, hey.
Which wasn't very bright for most of the kids.
There you go. Yeah. And so he definitely recommended to my parents, to school, don't succumb to these people saying, oh, get a scholarship here, or to this academy, or go pro here. So that was one of the things he really instilled for me, you know, in my life when he was around.
I think one of the things, and both of you have spoken about this, is like you had the opportunity to go to the Philadelphia Girls School. Most of the kids in your neighborhood never had that opportunity. You had the opportunity to move toward tennis, which moved you toward a scholarship. I assume, were you got a scholarship in Florida?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. A lot of people, you know, do you look at the neighborhood that you left and said, you know, there were people maybe just as good as me, as an athlete, or as whatever, and they didn't get the opportunity. Did you see that? Did you see that happen a lot, to a certain degree?
To a certain degree. The numbers were still, like that slide, the numbers were just so small.
It sticks in your head now, yeah.
You know, when I made it, I guess around 12, I made the national level tournaments. So I was top 5-ish in my area, in my section, so like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, so I was like one of those top players, the section, and so I got to go to the national tournaments, and so you take that picture before the tournament starts of the whole group,
and you're in there,
of 128 girls, and there's 2 little dots in the picture, right? So when you think about who's making it out and who's becoming, you know, that next level, there aren't very many, right? And that cohort, if you will, keeps getting older, and now you look at the coaching and things like that. So, so not really. When you see who kind of kept progressing, you know, you're not that shocked when you see the numbers, but in some ways, in terms of talent, you are shocked because, like, wow, this person had so much talent. What happened to them? They should be right here.
And you've seen both sides of that, because one of your heroes, if I'm using the right word, Zina Garrison, was someone that you became friendly with too, right?
Yes.
And Zina was a champion, and she won many tournaments.
Yes, it was. Watching Zina Garrison, she's probably before your time out here. But yeah, she was just so exciting to watch. Athletic, smart, quick, you know, and I was taken in by her in some respects. I made a video shoot with Zina. She always reached out, would hit with me. When she came to Philly and played all the pro events, she'd bring me out and I got to warm up with her before her matches. So it really was a cool thing, and I had coaches that helped me build those.
No, the flip side of that is, after you went through what you went through, the Williams sisters, and I know we're saying this for name recognition to a certain degree, because a lot of people came through your home, but the Williams sisters came through your home. How, in a way, did you relate to them, or did you, in the sense of, now granted, their father, Richard, was a very strong figure, but were you able to sort of talk with them about sort of what had you gone through, because you were a couple of years ahead of them?
I was. So the main times I spent with them when they were in Philly, we were just playing around, you know. So it was just, you know, playing dumb kid games. Then a little bit later, I guess in the teens kind of age range, it was a little more serious conversations. You know, are you excited about tennis? Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's fun, you know, and stuff like that. But it's still pretty light. I always kept it pretty light.
Sure, because they get enough heaviness from everybody else.
They get enough heaviness. It's just interesting to like be in van rides going to practice. And it was the national team would take people to practice, and you'd hear like Venus like belting music in the back, like belting out like, you know, karaoke type stuff, you know. So you remember like little things like that because we were all very young. So.
Well, and also it was the one place they could be normal. Because even at that age, if you don't recognize it,
and
you've got all that pressure on you.
And they were very normal. I mean, they would, you know, like punch each other in the arm, you know, like just very normal stuff.
Right.
So, very normal stuff.
Let's jump to University of Florida, okay? And one of the things, again, I was thinking about here was university and sport. In some ways, I'll ask you this first, Coach. Is sport kind of like the great equalizer? Is it a meritocracy? When people are together on the field, they can forget their differences because they all have, you know, they're all seeking excellence? I mean, give me some of your thoughts on that.
I think it has the possibility.
Okay.
With the proper leadership. Plus, you have to have diversity.
Right.
You know, if you have to me, it's easy to coach a team that they're all pretty similar.
Right.
They go to the same types of schools. They're the same, you know.
Right.
But it becomes a little bit more difficult when you try to, you know, coach a diverse group. But the one thing you do have in common is the sport and the fact that you want to win. and that's what, you know, sort of, you know, kept us, you know, together, is the fact that, you know, and I think when you play a sport, I don't care what level, if you want to win. And if you're playing on the street, you want to win, and you want to get the best team. You choose team. You try to get the best people on your team. And then after it's over. You go to the next. You lose. You're upset. And my 1988 team, they lost the year before that. They went all the way to the final and lost.
You were in the finals and you lost the year before. You had a perfect season.
And they were so, you know, they were upset. And then that senior year, those seniors came back, and they were all determined. This is not going to happen to us again. But they know what's going on in the background. And as a coach, you set your standards, but you know, certain things go on behind the scenes. And you got to talk to those captains and make those captains know.
They become the coaches on the field.
Oh yeah, and coaches behind, you know, after the
in the locker room, before you walk in and give them.
Make sure that people don't do this and do this and do that and go to class. I mean, so you know, it to me it prepares you for life as well, because you know, people are trying to be. And back in my day, teaching was one of the things that people did, you know, get good jobs.
Right.
But you know, to be able to survive in different environments, I think it's a plus, and I think that's something that in today's world that we're missing. You might have all the academic credentials to teach, but can you relate to all types of students? And I think sport has that possibility.
What strength does diversity bring to a team? Because again, you said it's a little more difficult to coach, perhaps people from all over, but what is the strength of that diversity? Both in terms of team cohesion, however you want to take it.
Again, it's the strength is, you know, to be really winners. It's hard, you know. Something inside.
Right.
And
it's a fire.
Right. And that fire. Some people create that fire. You know, that little argument that you had with this person over here might have created that fire within this person. And I get responses from my players now to them that made them perform differently. You know, because when your peer relationships are different from your coach-peer relationship.
Oh yeah.
So if somebody, you know, did something to somebody, and I always try to recruit, I wouldn't worry about people singularly, but I like to make sure that people can relate to somebody on the team. We're not all going to get along.
Right, but you remember what it was like to be the only one.
Right.
And you didn't want that happening to anybody else.
And there's differences within the cultures.
Right.
So I think it was a learning experience for them, but the one thing that kept us together was the fact that we wanted to win.
Tracy, let me throw the same question at you. When you look at diversity in sport, and again, the idea of like meritocracy in sport, did you see that on the teams that you were on when you were in team sports, that really, what it came down to in the end was, can you do it on the court? I don't care if you're from North Carolina, California, I don't care if you're white, black, green, whatever. Or am I overstating? It still exists, the issues.
It does. I mean, we were very diverse. At University of Florida, I mean, tennis is very international.
Right.
Before I got there, I mean, the team was stacked, but they were good, and they were from all over.
Right.
I mean, you know, they won the NCAA championship team before I got there. They won the doubles and the singles, and here I was, a freshman coming on.
And you're coming into
and
this.
I'm like, what is this? And we had a girl from India
Right.
on our team, the Netherlands, Florida, all over, you name it. And it was great to have all the different viewpoints coming together and practice, you know, accents, personalities. Our coach, Andy Brandy, was amazing.
Right.
Short little Puerto Rican man.
Right.
So he'd yell out stuff in Spanish all the time, you know. So it was just a really cool environment to be in.
Right.
Very tough as well. And then we ended up, you know, obviously doing well as
Right.
a team because of that, I think, because we were so different.
Right.
And our team now at Harvard, I mean, I believe we are probably the diverse teams on campus right now.
Really?
On the women's side, for sure.
Well, I want to get into recruiting for Harvard because that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
This is a tough question. In your careers, in your playing careers, did you face racism or sexism or those things on the court, on the field? Did that ever come up? And if it did come up, I mean, I'm not saying within your teams perhaps, but I'm talking about you played all over the country, you played in many different. How did you handle that if it did come up?
Is that for me?
Sure, it's for both of you.
Yeah, I mean, there were some times when you scratch your head and you think, why didn't they pick me for this team? I beat this person.
Right, if you look at it on the merits.
I beat that person. I'm ranked higher than that person.
Right.
And they didn't select me for a certain team. So you'd scratch your head as a youngster.
Right.
And again, you didn't want to accuse anybody of anything. You thought it was probably racism, right?
Right.
You know, I can count the times I've gone into clubs, tennis clubs, tennis facilities.
Sure, right, exactly.
And you go in and you're minding your own business and you pick up your own racket bag. Excuse me, are you picking up your own racket bag? Is that yours?
Right, right.
And you're just like,
no, I'm
yes,
lifting your bag.
This is my bag. You know,
Right,
so
right.
That type of stuff happens as well. And then you could be on the court. You know, I remember as a junior player growing up in many matches, somebody and then the N-word comes out from your opponent across the net. So there's stuff like that happens. I think the first time that happened, I probably was about 12.
From your opponent?
From my opponent. And at first I was just confused. Like, okay, you're losing. You know, okay, why are you saying this? Like,
Right.
what are you trying to do here?
Right.
And then, you know, later on a coach told me, hey, you know, don't worry about it. It'll keep happening. So you just get tougher and tougher and you learn to kind of be callous to all those type of things. You just learn that it comes with the territory for the most part, sadly.
Right.
Sadly.
Right. How about you, Tina?
I guess in field hockey, I was playing my best field hockey in the mid-'60s, and I wasn't chosen for the team. They went to South Africa.
Which team, the national team or
The international team.
Oh, the international team, right.
And I was, you know, that South Africa was apartheid, so I didn't particularly realize that was the cause. But
Right.
that was, and they realized that they knew they couldn't select me.
Right.
So that was, you know, that was my first real jolt of you know, real racism. And then when I did make the team, and we would go certain places, and most of the time when you travel, you go to white establishments.
Sure.
And then,
White hotels and
so once we went into a place where it was all blacks, and all my teammates started to go the other way. I said, oh, no, come right in there. Now you know how I feel.
Yeah.
And I guess I wrote a letter to Tracy. I mean, you know, this was something I wrote, and I can understand what Serena is going through, because once you have a child, I tell my daughter this,
Right.
you know, your whole mindset is different. And I was so disappointed with that when I wasn't selected for that team that went to you know, Africa, that I wrote this letter to the association and say, but I wrote it a letter to Tracy, you know, to my daughter Tracy. I hope this doesn't. She'll have opportunities to do
Right.
And I was criticized by a lot of people for that.
What, for writing the letter and actually speaking out?
Right. It became an article, but it was criticized by a lot of people. But it was.
You had to say it.
I had to say it. And you know, when you're a parent, and that's what a lot of people don't realize, that we need parents as well as the athletes. The parents have a great deal with athletes.
Oh, parents, mentors, and all that. But I think you also faced another situation where you didn't get voted Coach of the Year when you had a perfect record when you won the NCAA championship. And they had, I think I read this somewhere, maybe I'm wrong, correct me, that usually when a coach would win a national championship, they would be voted Coach of the Year or get whatever honor would go with that. It's kind of obvious. It's like being the World Series champ manager. Yeah, you didn't get it that year, did you?
I didn't get it. We had 11 consecutive Final Fours. I didn't get it until I had a perfect season.
Oh, so the perfect season was when they finally gave it to you?
Right.
Because they couldn't say at that point. So you had 11 consecutive, what, NCAA tournament appearances? And that's only, what, 16 teams? 8 teams, 16 teams? And they never gave you a Coach of the Year?
No, you know, it was always some, you know, my assistant coaches or whatever. But, you know, that didn't. Some other things on it, but.
Right, but you rolled with it. Just a question, what time do you have, by the way? Because we were going to take. It's 9:50. And we were going to take a break at 9:50. Okay, everybody, we're going to take. Is that what you got, Delise? 9:50. Good. Your watch is working. That's good. All right, everybody, we're going to take a 10-minute break because you've been sitting for an hour and 20 minutes, and I know what I feel like. So take a break, and we'll pick. Okay, and thank you. And I'm gonna take this. How we doing? We're going to talk about some issues here for about 30, 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to questions that you have, which will be great. And one other thing, if any of you are interested here in perhaps working on podcasts or something, let me know. Come up and introduce yourself afterwards, because I might be able to use you. So, anyway, oh, is that a little loud? Okay. So I wanted to get into some of the issues. Let's go back to the numbers that we saw. Again, we know the problem. It's obvious. In your mind, and I'll start with you, Tracy, what are some of the solutions? How do we build pipelines so that from the ground level up, that 6-year-old get into the sport, that 8-year-old, 10-year-old, doesn't matter where they come from? What are some of the solutions in your mind?
Sure. First of all, I think we have to be intentional about making a change, looking at the numbers and actually seeing them as accurate and really doing something about them.
Right.
A friend of mine, M.K. Asante, who's a professor down at Morgan State, he has a saying he always uses: when you make an observation, you have an obligation. And that's one of those things where if you see something, you got to do something, right? So be intentional. From the recruiting standpoint, I know me in particular, I'm intentional about the way I recruit. Just like in basketball, if you need a center, you need somebody on your team who looks different than someone else, right? And so I think if we are intentional about our moves, I think we're going to be in a better place. That's number one. At a younger age, we got to also improve our efforts, right? I think in middle schools around the nation, you're seeing kids, not being able to have gym class. That's crazy, right? I can't even imagine being in middle school and not having gym class and things like this. So how do you even get kids, thinking about sports, boys or girls, right? In an organized way. So I think if we can improve the efforts at a younger age, I think we'll be in better shape for sure.
Okay, Tina, let me ask you the same question.
I agree with Tracy and the Black Men in Sport Foundation. And we're trying to reach younger kids from pre-K all the way up to 8th grade. Because girls especially, they sort of drop out around middle school, like 7th grade. And you also have guaranteed parent participation in pre-K through like 3rd or 4th grade. The parents are there. And parents, they know about basketball, they know about track and field, but basketball players make great lacrosse players. Track stars make great lacrosse and field hockey players. But they're exposure. You got exposed. Tracy's where she is because she was exposed to sports and all kinds of sports, but she went to private school. I was here in this position because I was exposed to sports at an early age, at 9th grade. And this pay-to-play model, you know, some people are making money, but you know, I'm concerned about the public school kids and the working class parents. And I know we could have never had afforded to give Tracy the opportunity to play tennis because I taught at Temple. Make money. And
you made $11,000 your first year.
Right, $11,000. My husband was in business for himself.
Right.
So it was because of the National Youth Sports Program. I bring that up again.
Right.
Where she was exposed to, you know, a lot of sports.
Now, just so people know, the National Youth Sports Program, what they used to do was in the summer times, they would take kids and they would bring them, many for the first time, onto college campuses where they would expose them to sports. And they would, I mean, this is so youth in the neighborhood, it'd be like for the first time, they might on college campus, especially if their parents hadn't been there before. And this was such a great program, and that's what you got exposed with, right?
Definitely. And one more thing is glamorizing sport more. Yeah, I know Venus and Serena, as far as tennis is concerned, they boosted the numbers tremendously.
Right.
I talked about seeing like 2 dots in the picture when I went to national tournaments.
Right.
Now as a recruiter, when I'm going back to look at kids, I'm seeing like 15, 16. You know, so it's more, you know, but out of like 300, right? So it's not that many more, but they're better. They're ready and they're winning tournaments, and there's Sloane Stephens and there's people out there who are doing really well, partly because of the surge of the Williams sisters. So the more you can glamorize different sports and jobs that folks of color are doing, not just black folks, it could be any people of color, you know, are doing, the more others will be able to follow behind and so forth.
What are some of the difficulties, though? Let's talk about the practical part of it. Institutions are always tight with their dollars. And when affirmative action first got going, so many people got exposed to token hiring or token interviews. Some people I've talked to who've been in that position said, look, even though they seemed like a token interview, they were just bringing it in to check a box, at least they met us. Other people hated those interviews. How do you convince institutions that you've been involved with to really buy in, to not just try to check a box, to really create the kind of program? Pipelines, that takes money that schools need to give up. So give me some examples. Start with you. How did you convince, if you had to, Temple or anybody else to say, look, we're ignoring something we have to pay attention to?
Well, the only reason why I came to Temple was because of the activism of the students at Temple.
This is an important point. Yeah, I'd like to, we need to get into this a little bit.
And I think, and that's still true. I mean, the football players, there was a fight in the locker room between the white and the black players, and President Lee, of course, you know, brought them all together, and they negotiated. And one of the things in the negotiations was to have a studies and race requirement for all the students on Temple's campus.
So every student just coming at
every student,
the outcome of the administration of this fight.
Every college had to create a studies and race course.
Right.
Faculty at Temple's faculty, that was most controversial, topic in faculty senate was the passing of those courses, but it had a major results, and we started a studies in race requirement. I taught a course called Racism in College Athletics and Minorities in Sports, and then the law school had courses. Every college had courses. A student had to take, I think, two courses before they graduated.
In race and race.
Right,
and all
in the
that.
studies of race.
Why was that so I mean, this may sound like an obvious question. So it was obviously a majority white faculty. Mm-hmm. Why was this so controversial to them? Did they think, we can handle this, we don't need to tell the kids this, they can figure it out? Or was it like they just didn't want to even discuss it?
Well,
who knows?
I mean, everybody thinks their field is the important field in the world.
Right.
However, especially when you live in the city where you're surrounded by African Americans, black families.
Yeah.
And then another thing we got, and most of the time the administrators and the university, they need support from the outside in order to get what they want accomplished.
Outside meaning like Board of Trustees, or you're talking about students, but you need to...
Students, but the community as well.
Right.
You know, I built a relationship inside and outside the university. So, and that's important.
You mean like going to the churches and going into the community
Right,
to say, because
right.
at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, where I worked for a
Right.
long time, they've had that whole problem because they ignored,
Right,
you know, a
right,
very majority
right.
black, you know.
And your city politicians, because
Right.
nothing can go on unless they pass it.
Right.
So, you know, it takes an effort on inside and outside the university to make something real.
Right. How about you? You know, again, Harvard fortunately has an endowment that's just out the, you know, I mean, they got the richest endowment in America. But yet at the same time, I can't imagine when you wanted things, especially when you first came in, maybe you hadn't won the Ivy League title yet, and we should talk about how that maybe changes the calculation on campus. How were you able to convince the administration to fund ideas that you had that may deal with diversity or things? What's sort of that, how do you dance that dance?
Sure. Well, fortunately, our department and our deans of admissions, they champion diversity. It's one of the things that we're, you know, focused on right now, and how do we make it better on campus, things like that. So it was never an issue as far as, like, you know, putting forth some of my, you know, agendas or whatever.
It was a mission statement for the institution.
It was a mission statement for the institution.
Right.
However, it's complicated to actually get done, right? So, for people and things like that. I think it's a work in progress. I think there's a lot of work to be done on several levels, but it's nice to know you have support systems in place to keep the ball rolling forward, so to speak. You know, you have other coaches now. When I look around, I see other coaches who look like me, you know, on staff, so that's great.
Right.
You know, I think student-wise, I think it's always interesting to see the numbers.
Right.
I love to see them. I'm not really sure what they are.
You mean at your institution?
At my institution.
Right.
I know there's several sports. There's like golf. You know,
Right.
I think our whole golf team I believe is Asian.
Right.
I believe, you can pick out the teams
Right.
at Harvard with the most diversity. But in general, I think there's a lot of work to be done. But the good news is we are focused on it.
Well, you started talking about students, and I think of how many student bodies have, you know, certainly in the last year, 2 years, have campus looked at buildings named after certain people, Woodrow Wilson, I'm thinking on Princeton and all that stuff, and they've said, no, we're not going to take this. This has to go. Let's talk about the power of the student body to make positive change, to basically hit the administration in the pocketbook, or make them nervous because they're going to put them on TV, and then all of a sudden, oh God, we're not going to get the number of applicants we need. So let's touch upon that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, in terms of students, I mean, you learn so much from our students every day.
Right.
I mean, you're debating about anything from Bitcoin to, you know, politics, you name it. You know, our kids on campus, I'm sure, you know, every campus, I mean, they're the movers and shakers, so to speak, right? The way I run our practices and run our program is I try to get a lot of input from our kids. So we'll talk after practices and say, how did it go? What should we change? And I don't know if that's tennis specific, because tennis is an individual sport. Everybody's so different, and we're quirky, and we're right? But we try to get their input, right? And if we get their input to change something, we do that when we can, and it's more of a democracy, and I like that. I like that.
And are you getting, again, there's different people you have to convince when you work in an administration. First, you got to convince your athletic director. Well, sometimes, and I know you face this at Temple, sometimes you got to convince the other coaches to take you seriously. I mean, we'll start with you. At Harvard, has it all where you had to get other coaches to buy into things that you were trying to do, or was that always acceptance and it was the next level up where you hit? Because you can hit resistance anywhere. Sure.
I mean, you always get resistance. I mean, it could be a fellow coach. It could be the men's tennis coach. Who knows, right? At the end of the day, you have to figure out who's on your team. Right? I tell people all the time, you have to figure out who's your support system, who's a goal builder, and who's a goal buster in terms of getting. Who's
Eeyore, basically.
Exactly. Who's Igor, right?
Yeah.
Jabba the Hutt, whatever, right?
Sure, right.
And so,
I remember hearing from a kid, he goes, oh,
there
you
you
know.
go. So it's one of those things where it's like it's being on a team, right?
Yeah.
And so once you have that system down and figure out who's on your team, then you're ready to go, right? And then it's convincing the AD or convincing those managers who were in place. And again, fortunately, right now we're at a time where I think people are very open to new ideas as long as you're coming with a solid plan in place.
Well, as long as there's integrity to the idea. And again, if the goal is winning, if the goal is putting the best team together, why would you want to cut out a percentage of the talent pool? It makes, you know, so. But again, just touching from your experience at Temple and whatnot, I mean, granted, it was 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Was it harder to convince people to be, you know, as you went up the ladder, whether it was alumni or whether it was whatnot, was it tough? Did people fight it?
Well, it was a different type of environment. You know, people were faculty. I mean, we had, especially the African American faculty, we were had a black caucus, and if anything, if I won a championship, they were right there supporting me. If something went down that they didn't like, they would be in the president's office. They had an affirmative action officer who was really would call you in, talk to you, and say, "What do you want, Tina?"
Right.
And then, "How can I help you get it?" You know, that was kind of.
Someone was fighting for you.
Right. Right.
Right.
And then we had the support from the people from the outside of the community as well, within our little communities. And then the faculty senate, there were hot debates, whereas now things are very, you know, top down, you know, like a dictatorship. That's how I feel anyway.
So it's actually harder in ways to make change, or
to me it is. We don't have that.
sort of flat, like a horizontal hierarchy as opposed to a vertical hierarchy.
I'm sure Dr. Lapchick over there would understand, because he was one of the ones out in the 60s. We were all, you know, fighting for different things for our children, for Tracy and the other children. And another thing that's different is this education. You know, like they're taking away the sports, they're taking away the arts, taking the music, things that made people come to school. And my mind works just like the kids' mind. I can't sit for more than 40 minutes without
call that
get up.
Spilkies where I'm from. You get Spilkies, you gotta move.
I gotta move.
Hey, these guys have all been sitting for 2 hours. They don't
I applaud them.
See where they got the around the
But, you know, like I tell, you know, folks, my son went to private school too.
Right.
And at Temple, so I had him tested, because he would probably, if he were going to school now, they would probably have him on drugs, because he'd be sitting here, you know, dangling like this, but he would be listening, but he, you know.
Right.
So I had him test, he's okay, but he was just a normal boy.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that, you know, these kids, they have them sit in the classroom for an hour and a half, and they can't, there's no outside.
There's no phys ed, so they can't burn, there's no recess. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
And we're in elite private schools, the kids are, you know, they are allowed to get up, walk around, discuss things, but we're all about the testing and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, they don't even want to come to school, you know.
Well, there's nothing they can identify with. Exactly.
You know, so these are the things that, you know, like I think the foundation and other groups, so we have a lot of groups, so we got to make sure that, that we're all, you know, thinking about public school education and making sure all kids have the same advantages. And now I'm beginning to talk to people who are affluent, and they're getting upset, African American parents and white parents too, because they're paying all this money.
Paying your taxes?
No, they're paying money to send their kids to these AAU programs, and they're traveling all over the place, and and then their kids get to be in 12th grade, and they're so sick of the sport, and they get into school and they don't want to play the sport, and the parents are out of all this money, and they're thinking about their retirement. I'm not going to have any money in retirement. I say, well, you're crazy. You know, let the kids, send them to, you know, public. That's why we improve the public schools,
so they don't have to go to all these other things.
And then let them choose what they want to choose. And if they're passionate about it, you know. And then there's other things in sport too, careers in sport.
In doing the podcast, I learn a lot all the stuff my wife's been trying to tell me for a long time, like you don't know what it's like, you're a guy. And she's right. I didn't think of a lot of things. One of the things that comes to mind is women, and especially women of color, not feeling comfortable being themselves. And the story that came to mind was, if you go into any college administrator's office, she would say, you look, every guy there, doesn't matter whether they're 23 years old or 50 years old, you see pictures of the family, and they've got their whole cubicle, right? This one woman said to me, she did not put a picture of her family up until she actually made full professor at a university, because she felt if she'd done it sooner, they would judge her as not being serious about being, I've heard this from many people in academia along the way, or women who say, women of color say, you know, I feel like I can't be mad at somebody. I'll be angry, I'll be the angry black person. Does that still exist? Or is that bygone days? Or is there sort of a sense that you, depending on what you do, you can't be yourself? You have to be constrained, you have to play a role. I'll ask you, Trace.
Sure. One of the pieces of advice I was given by someone was you have to be yourself for going into this new role. But of course, I mean, if you, as a woman, not just a black woman, I feel like if you are, you know, strong and direct and, you know, forthcoming, you are labeled the B word, right? It could be at practice, it could be any time in a meeting or whatever. Right. So you're always thinking about that in the back of, you know, I think some people automatically assume that, you know, someone's not smart enough or what have you. I know myself coming from a scholarship school, right. University of Florida, and coming into the Ivy League was a little bit different, because you have to learn, you know, how the Ivy League is and how to recruit and how to, and the way of life and how to, you know, be a student at Harvard, right? But people, after 10 years, they still think that for some reason you still don't get, you know what I mean? Right. Even though, you know, your kids, you know, are thrilled and things like that. So there's always obstacles you have to, you know, push through, no matter if you've been somewhere, you know, 2 years, 2 days, 2 minutes, right? So you have to think about those things. But in general, I think the cool part about being a coach, you sort of run your own program. So
it's your own little world, little bubble, yeah.
Right. So it's like you have the department, but you have a little cocoon. So maybe you're one way there, but then you can be the way you need to be or want to be amongst your team. So I think that's the cool part about being a college coach.
But again, one of the things I heard from a lot of women, maybe this isn't women who are older, they felt like so many good women left the sport because they were convinced they couldn't raise a family. They got messages all the time. You can't raise a family and be a serious coach. You can't raise a family and be an athletic. Did you see that when, I mean, you had your daughter pretty much what, right in 72, 74, something like that. Did you feel that in your time? Did women talk about that issue, women coaches?
Well, I taught at Lincoln University, historically black school. Right. And that's when I really got grounded in so many things. And like, it was such a different world from the athletic program and the program, and to see people like look like yourself, you know, in responsible positions, and when you walk into the gym, the whole gym was covered with, you know, everybody's coming to the women's basketball game, and I was the cheerleading coach, and I started a lacrosse team and the basketball coach, and to be able to interact with the athletic directors, and then John Chaney and Vivian Stringer were at Chaney, and
this is John.
They were at Chaney.
And Vivian went to Rutgers, right?
Right. And I met my husband. He was a Tuskegee, former athlete and coach at Tuskegee. Yeah. So it was just a different type of world. So
in terms of everybody, like, it was a family. Well, everybody says that about the HBCUs, is their attitude toward the student is it's a family.
Right. But you also have a social life, and you see the differences within our own communities. Like, you know, like we had one campus who walk in there who were very, very wealthy, African Americans, and we had some who were working class, and some who. So you still have a variety of folks. And I'm a Delta, and a Delta, you know, and the sororities and fraternities were important. And the reason why I got to Lincoln was because of Carol Black, who was the first African American female on Lincoln. told me about the job, you know, and like, so it was just so much different than what it was we going to,
Right.
you know.
But from your generation, then maybe, I mean, again, is this a problem?
People drop out all the time. Some of our best coaches, you know, drop out, change jobs. It's tough. I mean, every week I can count the weekends this fall. I've been in Boston, in my house, probably 2 times since the semester started. I've been physically home on the weekend because of the travel. So you can see how people, you know, decide to choose a different path. Or I think the key thing is, like, again, back to support system. You have to have a support system to figure out how to balance your time, balance your life. I'm still trying to figure that out myself, so I'm not a pro with that. But you have to love it, though, you know. And sometimes you'll go, you know, in and out of falling out of love with the whole thing. Sometimes like a drag, but so many good, you know, fun moments. This summer we were in Spain with our team, and that was fun. I got to recruit in Romania this summer, of all places. I'm like, I'm in Romania right now. This is wild, you know. But yeah, a lot of people drop out for many different reasons, and tennis specifically, you don't find that many women coaches at all. A lot of players are used to. Good question. I really don't know. Players are used to male coaches, and maybe because they can hit with them longer.
Right.
Probably. That's probably a part of it. I was on a panel a few years ago at the U.S. Open. We were talking about this. How do we increase the number of women coaches? And Billie Jean King was there, and Martina, and all these Chris Everett, all these people all these bigwigs were there, and the same thing came down to giving them more opportunities. So then they started highlighting more women coaches. Andy Murray, his mom coached him. So they started highlighting more women coaches, so you'll see more being highlighted on TV now, and again, glamorizing the profession. That's one way we can increase the numbers, but it's tough. I mean, it's you're busy all the time, but you got to love it to be in it.
I wanted, because we're going to, maybe another 10 minutes we'll open up for questions, so let me just conclude on a couple of things. Both of your lives, in my mind, are so committed to community. You keep coming back to community. And the story that I heard that struck me when you started coaching was seeing little kids who were from Philly, the Philly area, you know, who would stand at the fence and there'd be a security guard. They wanted to play. They loved what you were doing, but they were like, this is not for you. So can you talk a little bit about, because again, I think this is so important, how sport can not only bring you up and give you opportunity, but how it enhances a community. Let's start with you, Tina.
Well, I mentioned to you the other day that it would hurt me to see the kids wanting to come in and learn the sport, but then the guard saying, you got to get out of here.
Right.
So what we did, and the coaches in the area, we started a program on Saturdays, and we just volunteered our time. Because back in the day, you got credit for your, you were required to do service as a faculty member.
Credits. Right.
Oh, no, service.
Well, yes.
That was research, service, and teaching.
Oh, right.
So I put a lot of my effort into service. So we establish clinics on the weekends once a month. We volunteer our time and just make sure that the kids could come in and play, and the various public schools could come and play, and that enhanced the skill level.
Right.
So, however, look now, it's the same thing, it's even worse.
Because there's less opportunities for the kids.
And even though we have these great facilities, people have to maintain those facilities, they have to get money.
Right.
So if you're working, if your parents have money, then you can afford to pay that $100 for every session.
But
yeah. Right. But if you don't get that opportunity. So again, the foundation, Black Women's Sport Foundation, is trying to provide, but not convince other people to provide opportunities.
Do you have numbers, just rough numbers, of the number of kids who benefited over the years from your programs? I mean, it's got to be thousands and
thousands. And like I tell my students, and you know, I'm old, so I remember faces, I don't remember names, but if you see me in the neighborhood, say, you know, hi, Miss Green, and they do, so, and they tell me what they're doing, and then that's rewarding when I get letters, and you know, and I'm still in the area,
Right.
in Philadelphia. So that's the feedback that they give you. And some of them are, right now are helping me, with the foundation, because they're in important positions. And I never forget Carolyn Campbell, who is the Ivy. What's Carolyn's position?
She's the deputy
director of the Ivies. And she came to Temple to work on her degree, and she was and she played field hockey, so she became my assistant coach, and she was part of the NYSP program and
the youth sports program.
And she computerized all the files, and
She brought everybody in the 21st century.
Right, and she babysat for Tracy.
Well, that's the
and
important
then
part.
she becomes the deputy commissioner of the Ivies, but she also tells me, I ask her, is she ready? Because every parent thinks their child should be out there doing this, and she gave me honest. The timing is not right, Tina. The timing is not right, because she's in the midst of what's going on.
Right.
So, so you never know who's going to be where and when.
Exactly. Same question. Again, you're involved in a lot of different outside activities. How does that play into supporting the community? And I think one of the things with this too is it's so easy when you're trying to move your career up not to get ungrounded, to get unmoored. And I have to imagine reaching back into the community. This is the important thing, not how far you might get.
Sure. Well, one of the things I'm involved with in Boston is the Sportsman's Tennis and Enrichment Center. And it's a huge tennis center located in the heart of Boston and Dorchester, and with all kinds of programs going on there. And it's hard for me to pull away from it, because you see the need there in the community. We've had our kids on our team come out and to run clinics there. We've had kids come to our matches. That's always fun. So whatever we do, Harvard-wise, whatever we do, whether we go on a trip, I mentioned Spain this year, but 6 years ago we went to South Africa, and we really got to really give back in that moment. That was a real learning experience. But for me, it's kind of been ingrained from my parents to always, give back, and it's actually one of the things I look for in our recruits. Are they good in tennis? But are they grateful at the same time?
Especially at a place like Harvard, where everybody's been so high achieving and pushed that it's easy they could become very narrow focused.
They can be.
Let's end on this. When you run into people who you want to help, well, that's the wrong way to put it. If you would give the crowd here, these young people, give them 2 pieces of advice for when they're going to run into obstacles, for how you might suggest they might want to look at them. What you do to help people move forward? Because everybody needs that piece of advice.
Well, I think that's the great thing about sports, is the fact that you win and you lose. And then what I told my athletes, when they come to practice, leave all their problems behind, drop them out here. When you come to practice, this is like a therapy. And we're just going to concentrate and have some fun. And you got to keep the fun in it. And things are going to happen, but when you look at it from a large standpoint, most of the time it's trivial to what other people are going through. When I see what some people are going through, and I can still run and walk and talk and think, this other stuff is trivia. So you put everything in perspective, and I'm depending on you all to carry on the legacy of making sure that everybody has the opportunity to play.
Trace, what do you tell people?
I would say take a step back. Anytime you're rushing forward, going 1,000,000 miles per hour, you're involved in the rat race, whatever you want to call it. I would say take a pause. I think that's really important, and reflect and then figure out your next move. I think too many times we're trying to rush through stuff and we don't really stop and figure out what's really going on here. What are the intentions? Am I okay? Am I supposed to lose? But that's what I would give.
Listen, are you optimistic? I know you said, when you started the Black Women's Sports Foundation, 1992 or whatever, you figured by now the work would be done. Work's clearly not done. But are you optimistic about what the future brings with the next generations?
Yeah, with my interaction with the young people, yeah, I am. I'm optimistic. You know, and I think I call it experiential learning. Some things that I've tried to tell Tracy over the years. And, you know, now she's understanding, and I get those 5 o'clock in the morning calls, and because history repeats itself. And I think, you know, and I think the same thing with young people. You have to experience certain things, and unfortunately, these the drug epidemic and the riots in the schools and whatever, you know, it's hitting them.
It's a hard time for them.
Right, it is. So that's my take on it.
Got you. I know you're optimistic.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm excited. I think it's going to be better for sure.
Well, I'd like to thank you before the questions open up. I'm blessed today to have been able to talk with you. I'm blessed to have met Frank and to hear your family. And this has just been a wonderful. Thank you so much for being, excuse me, for being a part of it. Can we have a round of applause for our... MC, are we going to throw the floor open to questions?
Floor is open for questions. Please use the microphone.
All right, let's pass the mic around.
So thank you both today. It's been an incredible morning. Question, I guess for both of you, like as a white man and as I enter into the sport industry, which we saw the numbers when we first started this morning, what are some examples of something, maybe once I become a leader and am hiring, to where I can foster an environment that is welcoming to people from all cultures? And what are some examples that you've encountered where you do have a mentor relationship, maybe with somebody of a different race, where it's really worked out and they've been welcoming and understanding and have helped you along that path? And I guess overall, just how can I, as a leader in the sport industry, help the numbers, you know, erase that obvious barrier that's going on?
Sure, that's a great question. I think one of the things that helped me was to have mentors right away. Like let's say at Harvard, I got hired immediately. The swim coach, Steph Morawski, was right there, always helping. Our volleyball coach, Jen White, she was there helping me. Of course, our basketball coach, he's a black male, Tommy Amaker. He's been amazing, welcoming me, pulling me in, and being there. So I think creating a system, you know, formally, but then also maybe kind of nudging people maybe informally to help galvanize that relationship as far as a mentoring approach goes. If in a power role, you know, in the future, I would say definitely hire females for sure and put them in a position of power, you know, along with you, and also, you know, racial and ethnic minorities. You need that diverse group of thinking. I think it's going to make your company, your organization even stronger.
And I mentioned before that actually the foundation was started with help from my colleague Bob Lehead, who his office was right next to mine, and you know, he was in swimming as well, and he was very instrumental in helping to start the foundation. But we had a personal relationship too, because we would, you know, laugh and have fun, and you know, and the kids would sit outside his office, and so you know, I think that there's room for everybody in this fight for equality.
Great. I don't want to discourage you from asking questions, but when you do ask a question, please stand up and introduce yourself to our speakers.
Hello, my name is Amber Hudson. My question to you is, with both of you all being the first or the only in your playing career and your professional career, did that ever make you feel like you were not meant to be there? And if so, how did you overcome that?
Well, like I said, I've never wanted, I'm okay being the first, but not the so I've worked hard over the years to make sure that other people have the same examples, and some of my white players have make sure that they now have make sure they have African Americans, people of color on their team, so they're really carrying on the legacy. So lacrosse and field hockey is changing, but changing slowly, but you know, it is changing. A lot of them Division II and III, which in Division II and III they're great opportunities, And it doesn't have to be just Division I. So.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, for me, I took over 2 programs that were struggling. I mean, it's like, below a losing record, like one match, had like 20, And so you get in that situation and you lose even more. And it starts to mess with your mind and what's it called, imposter syndrome. So you don't know what to think. But then once you start, and you know yourself, right? But once you start, figuring things out and things get better, and again, that support system around you, that's really important. But again, if you don't have that, those losses start to take a toll and you start to believe you are a loser, right? But I think at the end of the day, I think it's all about you inside. You got to believe in yourself, for sure.
Good morning. My name's Deanna. Deanna, hold on one second. We're going to put you on the mic. That way everybody hears you all across the web.
Thank you. My question for both of you is that you spoke earlier about youth today needing more exposure to diversity in sport or diverse sports. And I have nieces and nephews who are growing up and they're starting to get more involved in sports. So what are some suggestions that you think we could do as sport leaders to show them that there's more than just basketball and football and like those normal sports, get them involved in like lacrosse and tennis and stuff like that?
I think supporting local programs that have things already in existence is important. There's obviously in all the major sports, they have grassroots organization programs that are going on right now to get kids in that pipeline that we've been talking about. So it's really like doing the research and figuring out what's going on and what's working. And some of them aren't everywhere. So maybe there needs to be one. You have to write someone and get one where you are or where they are. Tennis is one of those sports where there's so many programs that where you can start at it probably for free. I don't know how good you get, until you start paying some money, but you can start.
And I agree with Tracy, and I think that we should, again, start early and go to where the kids are, oftentimes it's a major problem in most cases. And that's why I like PAL so much, is the fact that, they normally have transportation, so they can, if the kids want to go somewhere to expose, they have that transportation, because it's a lot of money to transport kids. But if you can get 2 or 3 coaches or undergraduate students to go to the school where there's predominantly black kids and work with them, and that's what some of our coaches at Temple have done, and made a
Hello.
You're on.
Hi, Sora. How are you? Good morning, and thank you both for being here again. I just wanted to know if you can talk more about your foundation with the Black Women in Sports. Is that something that's primarily in the Philadelphia area, or if not, if it's more so around the country, how would someone that's interested go about getting involved?
No, we were created in Philadelphia, but we have chapters in D.C., Boston, L.A., in about at least 10 different cities. And the NCAA they gave us a grant, and we had conferences one at Harvard, one at Norfolk and Temple. And so what we're trying to do is to make people aware of, and I learned this from my husband. I didn't realize what talent we had when I was starting out in the South, because he was familiar with the Nell Jacksons and the Dorothy Richies who went to Tuskegee. I wasn't. So we're trying to educate everybody about who's who and where they are and what they've done, but also tell them what's going on now, and report what lab your group is doing. But I do think the national governing bodies and the NCAA can be very powerful in this effort.
I think we have a question on this side. We're making Dave run all over. That's why you're so skinny.
How you doing? My name is Mo Greenidge. I was a former football coach, aspiring athletic director. I was wondering, for both, you coaches. What is the message that you tend to want to build your program around, or even you would want your players to leave with? Like, what's your motto that you make sure that they leave with?
Well, in our National Youth Sports Program, actually a Temple intern, a male intern, created our motto, is reach victory through hard work, discipline, and respect for self and others. And I was in Detroit this week, and it was really really heartwarming to see what's happening in Detroit, and Aretha Franklin, who Tracy was on we had a event at the Open where Tracy actually met Aretha, and all the first was on this program, and that really touched me, and that respect, and so much can be learned in the arts. I mean, you listen to Aretha's music, you listen to what's going on and what these kids are saying in their music, and that respect for self first and then others is really, really important, especially nowadays.
One of our things we stand for is education through athletics, and so really preparing our kids for the next step in life. And so, that's teachable moments all the time, just really different things, having, speakers come in, alumni come in and talk to them about jobs, life, how they got to where they are in their careers. That's always been important for us. So not just the sport, but learning, beyond that. Also, it's one thing to be successful, another thing to be great. Talk about Aretha Franklin. I was sitting next to Cornel West the other day. It was like crazy, right? At this thing at Harvard, and he was talking about how Aretha wasn't. She was great, right? We're talking about Aretha right now, right? And so our team, we're trying to figure out a way for them to understand that concept. So just something new every year to keep it fresh, but generally speaking, we're about education through athletics.
How you doing? My name is Chevelle Lee. You mentioned before how you accept people or athletes that come to your house and stay. What provoked you to do that, and how long have you been doing it for? So before you mentioned that you and your husband, you accept athletes to come to your home, and if they want to work out or do other things in the community, when did you start doing that, and what provoked you to do that?
So people came to your home, and how did you start doing that? I remember the Australian national team came to your house.
Right, and why did you want to do that as well?
Well, because of the international nature of the sport, and the sports that I'm in, it's normal for people to host different international athletes. So we were able to host folks from Australia and Great Britain and have personal relationships with them. And Venus and Serena, when they came to Philadelphia, my lacrosse team, they got a chance to see my lacrosse team when they were like, 10 and 11? So that was a great experience for my lacrosse and for them to see, the lacrosse, and for Tracy to play with them, and but nowadays you probably would be very careful about doing something like that.
Well, your family also too.
I mean, things changed. I mean, that's things that we took, we did because, it was, it's now you're like, ugh.
Well, your parents took in foster kids too.
Right, yeah, my parents took in, foster children. There's so much that, some things that in the past, we shouldn't throw out. There's some things we should throw out, but I think sometimes we're throwing out the wrong things, and we need to look back and see what was successful.
Right.
And I'm depending on you all to take what we started and fix it if it needs.
Any other questions? We got one here. And by the way, while this gentleman is, I just want to acknowledge someone who just came in the room, who has helped sponsor this forum today. Karen Morrison from the UCF Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Where is she? Oh, hey, in the back. Thank you, Karen.
Hi, my name is Nikhil Sen. Thank you again for sharing your time. My impression for a while has been that women kind of have a chance to make a significant impact on this generation. I think that there's barriers, obviously, in the sports industry, but I think women are more kind of emotionally conscious, aware, alert, and I was just wondering what you see as, the main barriers to kind of progress, improvement. I know there's stereotypes, especially in sports, like the male tendency to kind of assert dominance. So how do you work with that, and what do you envision as being like how to create change going forward? Do you think it's just appointing more women leaders, or what else can communities do to kind of improve and enhance women's position in sports, both in...
It's a loaded one. That's I think the first thing, I think women. So I think those who are in higher positions have to reach back and help from that standpoint, number one. And then number two, I mean, again, Harvard's a very interesting place. So you see, you've heard of these, board networks and things like that. And they're probably true, right? So it's how do we, how do we, move in general in this situation? So I think it does come and actually saying, wait a minute, let's pause, not just come to the meeting and sit there. Let's take your input, let's actually involve you in the decision making, and then go from there. What was the other question?
Whether you think it's appointing more women leaders or more just openness and men.
Yeah, and it's a lot of listening as well. I think sometimes voices aren't heard, some people are there, like I said, and their voices really aren't heard. So when more voices are heard, input, and then I think everything changes. But you have to be able to listen and have a voice, just like voting in a few weeks. You got to vote, right? Or else your voice is not heard.
And I think there's differences between men and women, and men and women, girls and boys they grow up differently. And I think that you have to maintain. And I think women have to be, don't become somebody else to satisfy somebody else. I mean, my husband and I, we disagree on a lot of stuff, but in the
I know Frank agrees with me on
that. But he's my greatest supporter and my best friend, and he was, very instrumental in when I the stuff of being a coach. He had to pick them up from the daycare center, and he was the one who traveled with them to all these tournaments and stuff with Tracy and Frankie, because I was too busy doing what I had to do. Then when they became teenagers, then I dropped out so that I could be with them, because especially with Tracy with the private school, because people with money doesn't mean that their parents are home when they're inviting these kids, are inviting them over to the so the roles changed a little bit. So then he was able to do what he wanted to do. So it's a combination of, and I think men, I got a lot of my self-esteem through my father. My father thought I was the world. We'd wait for him to come home and meet him at the bus stop and jump into his arms and he'd carry us home. I mean, and same thing with Tracy idolizes her father, more so than me, because I'm always telling her the truth.
I'll add one more thing to that, just from what I've seen in institutions. The number one key thing, and this is where all of you can have an input, the person who's on the top of any hierarchy sets the tone. What they have to be willing to do is put people right underneath them that have their imprimatur to go implement programs, because otherwise everybody underneath doesn't take it seriously. They'll show up for the meetings. They'll say, okay, I was there, and I want diversity. If the person at the top is committed and empowers the people in charge, it might be a vice president of diversity or then it works. Then they know the top person is serious. If that, you could call it a threat, you could call it whatever you want. If that isn't there, if it's only coming in from the bottom levels where they're serious about it, it doesn't get the institutional support and the change doesn't happen. That's just my opinion.
And also the African American community, we buy a lot of stuff. We have a lot of buying power. So golf. I mean, you know, we're not a lot of golfers, but we're by the Tiger Woods hats and Tiger Woods shirts, and the same thing with all these sports. Who are the people who go to a lot of the games, who buy a lot of the paraphernalia? You know, so for those people who are thinking that the business model, they're missing out on a large population, and they know it. So it's a different world now.
I think we have time for one more question. Well, we got two. We got time for, well, let's, I don't think we've heard from you yet. Come on, run over there.
By the way, Matt.
I can sit here and bust your chops.
Matt, by the way, it's athletic build, not skinny.
Good morning. My name is Natalia Brzezina. I actually have a question for Coach Tracy Green. So when the sexist incident happened in Harvard a couple of years ago with the men's soccer team, what was your perspective on how all of that was handled? Kind of changed the situation of conversation within the athletic department?
Sure. She asked about our men's soccer team incident a few years ago. And yes, it really did change everyone's perspective, I think, across the nation. I think all schools, in particular, our program, I mean, we really took a pause. Like I talked about a pause, we took a pause that, hey.
Tracy, can you just really quickly, for people who might not know this, just explain real quick?
Sure. So there was an incident years ago where our women's soccer team was the subject of just some really, really bad behavior by the men's soccer team. I believe they had some kind of rating system where they would rate the women players and say, you know, all types of, you know, nasty things about them. I think all like the freshmen or something like that, and these positions, you know, who knows? And somehow this document got discovered, and it was out there, right? And it was, you know, all over the news and what have you. And our school ended up, at the time, the team was doing very well. This was a few years back, so it wasn't the current team, so it was like some teams before then. And our team was doing very well, our men's team. And I think the school, basically AD, decided to stop their season. So they were doing very well, and you know, curtailed just like that.
That's a strong step.
And that was a strong step. You know, there was some controversy about it. Should it have been worse? Should it have been? Was it enough? You know, who knows? But in terms of the fallout, it was a lot. You know, we had, you know, people coming in to figure out what was going on at our school. You know, some folks around here, I think, got involved at different levels. But in general, from our team's perspective, it was a wake-up call to really say, hey, you know, as a women's team, we have a voice. Let's just make sure everything's okay, so we can all be all right and not have this happen again,
but again,
or anything like it.
But the institution from the top down.
From the top down, it was very taken very seriously, and it still is. We're still doing things to make sure it's not going to happen again. And kids are dumb. They do dumb things all the time, but it should not happen. Very seriously.
We've got a wrap here. I could talk to you guys all day. This has been wonderful. And again, Coach Tracy Green, Coach Tina Sloan Green, please let them know how you feel. Dave, are you finishing up here, or Garnett? We're done? Everybody get lunch? Thank you all.
Thank you so much.